lemongrass creamed spinach. If that doesn't make you hungry, then I don't know what will. So we're going to go ahead and introduce ourselves, the whole staff, and then we will have the presentation. After that, admissions and financial aid will go over information about our program here at Bauman. So hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Antonella. I am one of the admissions representatives here, and I'm going to pass it over to Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Great to see you. My name is Michelle. I'm the admissions manager. I'm going to pass it over to Samir.
Thank you, Michelle. Hi, everyone. My name is Samir Ahmed, and I'm one of the financial aid administrators here at Bauman College. I'm going to pass it off to Chef Martina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chef Martina. I'm a holistic chef instructor here at Bauman College, and I'm really excited to be here with you this afternoon.
Yay, awesome, perfect. So, Chef Martina, I'm going to let you just take it away.
Wonderful. Well, let's go ahead and get this party started. I'm just going to spotlight so that y'all can see the cooking magic happen. So here at Bauman College, one of the things that we really like to do is we obviously have the holistic approach to our cooking. So before we start cooking in every single class, we like to just take a minute to do some grounding breathing, just to sort of bring us into the space, bring us into the mindset, and really make us be present. So if you feel comfortable, you're welcome to leave your camera on, or if you feel more comfortable, you can turn it off. But just kind of settle in to a nice comfortable position. If you're seated or if you're standing, just really feel your feet connected to the floor. And just start taking some nice deep breaths kind of at your own pace. Just with every inhale, just acknowledging all of that good excitement and energy. With every exhale, just allowing yourself to let go of anything you don't need to hold on to for the next little bit. Nice deep breaths in and out. Just really bringing you into the present moment. Knowing that this is a safe space full of learning and excitement. And one where there are no wrong answers or wrong questions. We're just excited to be here together. One more big deep breath. When you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back to the rest of us. So we really like to start our classes with just a little bit of this centering, just to make sure that everybody's kind of in the same headspace, because it can be challenging. What we do, cooking, learning in general, can be really challenging. So giving ourselves that little reset in the middle of the day, it's a great reminder for all of us. Okay. So today we are making this grilled fish with a coconut creamed spinach. I'm really excited to share this recipe with you. I worked in restaurants for the past 15 years, and I was the executive chef at a restaurant down here in North Carolina. This was one of my signature dishes, so I'm really excited to share it with you today. So we'll go ahead and get started. This chef skills circle that you are sort of attending today, we do demos, for admissions, but then also every week I actually do a chef skills circle, which is kind of a bonus class. So you'll have your class, 2 hours every week if you attend, and then you have the option to sign into other bonus classes, this being one of them. So today we're going to learn a little bit about knife skills. We're going to prep some beautiful food, and then I'm going to show you how to get some awesome grill lines on your fish. So let's get started. I'm sorry if there's a little lag between my cameras. We had a little bit of storms rolling through here, so our internet is kind of in and out. But pretty soon you should see my cutting board, and we'll go ahead and get started on our prep. Okay. So with knife skills, one of the things that you'll learn here at Bauman is that learning how to use your chef's knife, learning how to use your knife and treat your tools properly is going to be really essential as a chef. So we want to make sure that every time we go to use our knives, that we are treating them respectfully. And one of the ways that we do this is sharpening or honing. This honing steel will actually come in the kit that you're provided with Bauman College. And what we want to do is we want to just align the fibers of our knife so that we can create a really nice sharp edge that will allow us to cut through all of our vegetables with ease. And it's actually a lot safer to have a sharp knife. So just getting our equipment ready. right? And then we can get started. So if you've seen the recipe beforehand, if not, we'll be able to send that to you after the fact. But one of the first things we want to do is dice up some onions. So the recipe says using 2 onions. Well, onions are not all created equal. Some of them are tiny, some of them are large. So what does that mean when you're looking at a recipe? Well, generally speaking, a recipe is kind of talking about the middle ground. So let's say I have a small and a large onion. If the recipe calls for 2 onions, we're kind of looking at the middle ground. So today, because I don't have any medium-sized onions, I'm going to use my small and my large, which will kind of average out to give me the amount that I need, okay? So for cutting our onion, we want to locate the root end and then the top papery end of the onion. So when we're cutting a dice, which we're going to be doing for this recipe, we want to cut off this top papery end first. So I'm going to go ahead, secure the onion with my guide hand. So this is going to be the hand that I'm not holding the knife with. And then using my knife hand, going to have a really nice grip. We want to make sure that we're pinching the blade on either side with our thumb and our forefinger, and then holding on to the handle with our back 3 fingers. This is going to give you the most control. This is going to give you the most stability when you're using your knife. So we're going to go ahead and cut right through with our beautifully sharp little knife there, so it cut right through. And then now we have this wonderful stable base. We've got this cut edge, so why not use that? We're going to go ahead and flip it over onto that stable cut edge, and then we're going to find sort of the middle point of the onion and cut right through that. Okay, so then we've got these 2 beautiful halves of onion, and it also makes it a lot easier to peel when you have a cut edge to work with. So we're going to peel off any of that papery material, any of those papery layers, because they're not going to cook down very nicely. They'll end up staying really tough. And instead, what we can do with this is we can save this in a little pile and use it for making vegetable stock when we need some. All right, so we'll go ahead and do that with our other large onion. Same thing here. Obviously, it's a little bit bigger, so you still want to stabilize with your guide hand. And then you're going to go ahead and cut off the top, that papery end, just so again, you have that nice stable base. We'll flip that over and then cut right down the middle of our onion, right? So again, nice and easy to peel. Make sure to get off all of that papery, the papery peels, those exterior edges, right? And then we can definitely save these again into our little stock scrap pile so that we can have a little store to make our vegetable stocks. We always encourage you making your own stocks just because you can control what goes in them. And also it allows you to sort of change the flavor profile for whatever dish you're making. All right, so now we want to go ahead and work on the dice of our onion. We want to make sure that our cutting board is nice and clear of all of those papery bits. Okay. And then for doing our dice, we want to start this off by cutting some lateral slices. And what by lateral, I mean having it on that cut side where we cut it right in half. We're going to pull the onion down to the bottom of our cutting board just so that our hand is kind of hanging off of the edge. This will allow us to make a really flat angle with our blade so that we can get a nice flat lateral cut. Okay. So for this recipe, I want to do a nice medium dice, which is going to be about a 1/2 inch dice. So if that means for me, I'm going to cut my onion just in 2 pieces laterally here. Okay. And so again, pulling that onion down towards the edge of your cutting board, holding it steady with your guide hand, either flat palm or with sort of a curved little beak, and then just sliding your knife through, not all the way back, only about 3/4 of the way, just so we end up getting some nice even width slices. Okay. We'll do that again on our large onion. I find that with a larger product, instead of using just my fingers, I like having the force and the stability of my whole palm. So instead, I'm going to go ahead and put my flat palm, and then again, slide my knife back, okay, making some really nice, even slices on the side. Okay. What this is going to allow us to do is get a really even dice. And a dice is just kind of a small cube. All right, so the second cut in our dice is going to be what we call a vertical cut. So if you notice on an onion, you actually have sort of natural striations or lines that go from the top to the bottom. This is where we're going to be cutting sort of along as a guide for this second cut. So we're going to use the tip of our knife now and then just cut back, again, aiming for that nice 1/2 inch size so we get an even sort of cube once we're all done. All right, so we'll go ahead and cut the rest of our onions. Again, using the tip of our knife just to cut straight down and get those nice vertical slices, okay? Same thing for our big guy, big onion. We just are gonna have to cut more of those vertical slices so that we end up getting that nice consistent 1/2 inch size. And you'll notice some of the pieces are starting to kind of fall out of the onion. That's perfectly normal, perfectly fine. It's just because an onion naturally has layers. So once you cut part of it off, some pieces might loosen up. All right, and then our last half, we'll go ahead and again, cut down using the tip of our knife, moving any of those pieces that fell out off to the side. And then the final cut of the dice is going to be across those vertical cuts that we just made. So this is going to get us to that beautiful little 1/2 inch cube. So again, lining up so you get that nice sort of 1/2 inch piece all the way through. Okay. Sliding it off the knife as needed. And then we want to stop basically where we stopped our first 2 cuts because I don't have any more lines here. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to plop it onto that big cut side, cut some really nice little sort of strips going around the circumference of the root of my onion, and then cutting those down into a size that's similar to the rest of my dice. Okay, great. So we're just going to do this with the rest of our onions. Again, just moving up to that line where we stopped our 2 first cuts, cutting through, kind of around the base of our root, just so we're using everything that we can in the onion, and then all we're left with is just this little piece of the root that we can then throw into our little stockpile. And then you'll notice when I use my knife, most of the cuts we're going to be using the back 1/2 or 1/3 of the knife. This is what we call the sweet spot. And because if you're pinching your blade, holding on with your handle, this is going to be the point of the knife that gets the most control and the most force behind it. So it's going to be the best place to make the bulk of your cuts. Okay. Then we'll flip it down. Again, using the tip of our knife now, just so we don't have to release it off of the tip of the root, we'll move around and cut all the way back so that we're not wasting any of that usable onion. And our last onion here, just moving through, cutting all the way back to that initial 2 cut lines, flopping it over onto that nice big flat surface where it's nice and stable, and then continuing to cut down to the root of our onion. And there we go. We've got a really nice pile of onions here, really nice dice. We're going to go ahead and move these into a mise en place bowl, also known as a prep bowl, just so that everything is nice and organized for us when we are getting ready to cook. Another tool that you can use is a bench scraper. So a bench scraper is going to allow you to sort of scrape along your cutting board without making your knife sharp, your beautifully sharp knife dull. So this is a great tool to have as well. All right, the other ingredients that we need to prep for today's recipe, I've got some ginger, I've got some turmeric root, I have some garlic cloves, and I have some lemongrass. So now as a chef, one of the things that I want to do is I want to kind of think about what's going to make the most mess on my cutting board, because I kind of want to cut it in order so that I'm making the least amount of mess to the most amount of mess. Now I know that garlic is sticky, so that one's probably going to be towards the end because everything is going to then smell like garlic after I cut that. Okay. The ginger and the turmeric root are both pretty, they're pretty soft. They're not going to be quite as sticky or as sugary as garlic. So those are both pretty easy and pretty clean. And same thing for my lemongrass. So now I just kind of want to decide between the three of these, which one I want to work with first. And I think I'm going to do the lemongrass because that's going to cause the least amount of mess. Okay. So for this recipe, you'll sort of notice on a stalk of lemongrass that there is a part towards the base that's a little bit more tender. If you kind of squeeze it, it gives a little bit more, it's a little bit softer. Whereas up here, sort of towards the top of our stalk, it's going to be really papery and also really, really tough. So for this recipe, I only really want to use this nice tender portion because I'm going to be mincing it up and I want it to melt into my spinach a little bit. So I'm going to cut off half of it. And you can absolutely use the rest of this for another recipe. I actually will usually throw a little bit of lemongrass into my chicken broth because it adds a beautiful amount of flavor, also has some gorgeous antimicrobial, antifungal, and antibacterial properties, which is pretty neat. But it's also just a beautiful flavor pairing with chicken. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and cut off just the end piece. So this is what was in the ground. It's a little tougher. It's sort of the root. And then I want to work on cutting this up into a really nice fine mince. I don't want it to be tough because lemongrass is extremely fibrous. I want mostly flavor without any of that sort of unpleasant texture. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start by doing some nice slices just down the length of my lemongrass stalk. Again, using that back sweet spot of my knife where I have the most control, the most force. Okay, and then keeping the tip of my knife on the cutting board. This is going to allow me to get a really nice rocking motion where I'm actually cutting on the down and forward stroke. So down and forward is where the cut is happening. And then you kind of use that tip of the knife in a rolling motion to get you back to the start. All right. So just kind of slicing up really nicely. And then from here, I'm going to go ahead and do a fine mince on it. And now a mince is just a really fine cut. And so what I like to picture is that whatever I'm cutting is kind of inside a rectangle here. And so the tip of my knife is going to be at the top corner of that rectangle. And I'm going to fan out in a sort of triangular fan shape and just go back and forth, kind of scooching my pile back to the center and just going back and forth to get everything a nice and fine mince. And I want it to be nice and even. I wish we had smell-o-vision. It smells so good in here right now. Just this lemongrass is beautiful. All right. So just working through, again, kind of bringing my pile closer together. And this is another good use of your bench scraper if you have one. Just bringing your pile back towards the center just so we can get all of those pieces minced up nicely. All right, so just trying to get, again, just to a nice fine mince so it can melt into the rest of our vegetables. Okay. I think we're almost there, seeing some nice even pieces. Just go ahead and scrape off my knife. And then again, we're going to put this into its own little mise en place bowl so that we can add it into our recipe when we're ready for it and have it ready to go. All right. The next ingredient that I'm going to work with is going to be my ginger. Okay. So for ginger root, you'll often see in recipes that they talk about an inch amount instead of, tablespoons or teaspoons. This is because it's actually a lot easier to sort of understand the amount of ginger you're using if we're talking about inches. So for this recipe, it calls for about an inch of ginger. So I'm going to use probably a little more than half of this piece here. And what I like to do with ginger, instead of using a peeler or instead of cutting off the skin with my knife, I actually like to use a spoon. I use a spoon because you can really get into all of those nooks and crannies without having to fight with the sharpness of a knife or a peeler. Now, you don't actually have to peel the skin of ginger either. There are a lot of really beautiful nutrients and minerals in the skin. But I do find that sometimes if it's an older ginger, if it's not a super young or immature ginger, that skin can be a little bit tough and it doesn't cook down as nicely. So I'll often peel it if it's an older piece of ginger. And again, I'll save these scraps. They'll again go into my chicken stock that I have to make later today. And then for our ginger, we want to also do a nice fine mince. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut it into some really thin slices, as thin as I can get it. Okay. Because ginger is also naturally very fibrous. So I want to make sure that I'm cutting it into small enough pieces that, again, it will kind of soften and melt into my dish. So I have these little planks, little pieces of ginger. And so now I'm going to cut those into some matchsticks. So some nice thin sticks of ginger, just kind of working down each little pile, trying to again get it as nice and fine as I can. And then I have sort of this little pile of ginger matchsticks, which I'm going to turn about 90 degrees. So now they're pointing this way instead of this way. And then I'm going to cut those into a really small or fine dice. Again, as small as I can get it. Because the more setup and work I do here, the less I have to do when I get it into my little mincing pile. Okay. All right. So again, I'm going to go ahead and picture that little rectangle, put the tip of my knife at the top of it, and then just go back and forth, mincing down my ginger. The ginger is a really beneficial root. It's really great for inflammation. It's really wonderful for digestive health. Can really aid in the digestion, especially and with the added fiber it has as well. So this dish here is packed with compounds that will help regulate blood sugar. It'll help you with your digestive issues. It will just kind of give you a nice cleansing dish to go with whatever fish you're choosing to grill. All right. So again, just kind of moving back and forth in that little fan shape, kind of scraping it back into a pile. Great. Again, we're going to put this into our little ready mise en place bowl using our bench scraper to get it off of our cutting board. All right. And we need to cut our turmeric root. So same thing for the turmeric root. You can keep the skin on. Again, it's got some really beneficial qualities. But if it seems a little tough, you can go ahead and peel it. And same thing with a spoon. I think it's really easy. It's a lot safer, especially if you're new to using a knife or a peeler. So just using that spoon to kind of lightly scrape off any of that tough exterior. Just look at how beautiful and vibrant that turmeric is. Okay. Great. Kind of working with the product you have, moving it around so that you can get as much of that tough skin off as possible. Great. Go ahead and clean off our cutting board. And now turmeric itself is also really high in anti-inflammatory properties. You can see a lot of people taking turmeric supplements these days, but fresh turmeric root is a wonderful addition to any of your recipes, and it will help you with some anti-inflammatory properties. All right, so for our turmeric, we need about 1.5 teaspoons. You can also use dried turmeric powder for this recipe. One thing to remember, though, is that dried spices are going to be much stronger than fresh ones. So I'm using 1.5 teaspoons of the fresh turmeric root. If I was using dried, I would use about 1/2 teaspoon. So usually a good rule is about 1/3 of the dry spice for the amount of fresh. Or the other way around, if you're using fresh instead of dried, you'll use about 3 times the amount. All right, and look how bright and beautiful that is, that gorgeous orange color. All right, so we'll go ahead and get our grated turmeric into our mise en place bowl. And then we're going to do our garlic. Okay. So for the garlic, I love garlic. If you take any classes with me in the future, you will know that I usually throw in way more garlic than the recipe calls for. This, however, is my recipe, so it's a pretty good amount of garlic to start with. I'm using 3 hefty cloves. So garlic is another one of those really, really nutrient-dense ingredients. It's high in vitamin C, high in vitamin B6. It's also high in selenium and fiber, so really beneficial. It has some antiviral properties as well and full of antioxidants. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and smash my garlic cloves. And to do that, what I like to do, put the flat of my blade just over the top and give it a nice little smash with the palm of my hand. That will allow that skin to peel off really easily without having to fight with peeling it. So a good little smash will allow that to loosen. All right. And then sometimes you'll notice that there's a little bit of sort of a tougher section where it connects into the rest of the bulb. So I like to just trim that off just to make sure that we don't have any little hard bits in our dish. So just taking that chef's knife, trimming off, and also trimming off any discoloration. So you can see here that this garlic clove has a little bit of discoloration. There is still some usable pieces here, but I may actually switch it out for another one. This discoloration often will cause bitterness to come out in your garlic. So if you're noticing that happening, you can always go for another one. Okay. So again, I'm going to use the flat of my knife, use the palm of my hand, give it a nice little smash, and it comes right out of that papery skin, right? And then we'll also just trim off any of those hard bits connected into the rest of the clove. All right, so now we want to also do a nice fine mince. We're getting our mincing on today in this recipe. So we want to cut in some nice small chunks, keeping your guide hand nice and curled so your fingertips are protected. And then again, picturing that little rectangle box and just fanning out back and forth, using really the whole middle section of my knife this time because I can get a really good rocking motion, keeping the tip of my knife on the cutting board. All right. Looking great. Just want a nice small mince. Scraping off the bits on the knife. Okay. One of the other really wonderful benefits of garlic is that it can help with blood pressure regulation too, and also improve cholesterol levels. So if you're working with clients that need to work with those certain things, using whole ingredients to help them, as they're healing can be really beneficial. It also helps that garlic is delicious, so adding a little bit extra into your dish is not a hardship. All right. Just getting down to a nice small mince. Wonderful. Now, when we cut garlic too, what we're doing is we're sort of breaking down the walls of the garlic, which allows us to access to the compound allicin. And allicin is one of those ingredients, one of those compounds that is really beneficial for health. What has the anti-inflammatory properties and actually is just a wonderful addition to whatever meal you have. All right. The last thing that I need to do before we get cooking is I'm going to be using some lemon zest and lemon juice to finish off and brighten up my spinach at the end. So I want to go ahead, grab my microplaner again, and I'm going to go ahead and just get this beautiful bright zest. And I only really want to get the bright yellow exterior. I don't want to go all the way down into the white pith because that's often a little more bitter. We just want all of those beautiful natural oils from the exterior, from that peel and that skin. Okay. So just dragging the microplane along the top of my peel, and then it kind of gathers here into this top section so that I can get it all out in one swift little tap. All right. So we'll go ahead now Tap our zest out. So we've got a nice little bit of zest here. And then we also want to juice our lemon. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it in half. Grab a little bowl and my juicer. And just get all of that beautiful tart vitamin C and juice. One of the reasons that we add our lemon juice into this recipe, why I added lemon juice to this recipe, is that vitamin C actually helps us absorb iron. And one of the main ingredients in our creamed spinach is extremely full in iron. So if we're adding that little bit of vitamin C, that's going to help us absorb all of that beautiful iron. Okay. All right. So now we need to get cooking. So I'm going to go ahead and change my view just so you can see sort of all of my prep. We're going to start cooking here. I want to get my heat up to about a medium high. And I want to kind of organize my ingredients, all of those beautiful little mise en place bowls, in the order that I'm going to use them. So I'm going to be sauteing my onions first with my ginger, my garlic, and my turmeric and lemongrass. So these are all of the aromatics. I want to saute all of this together to get some beautiful flavor, to wake it up, get a little bit of caramelization on my onions, and just really get that base of flavor at those levels that I want to build up. Okay. Next, I'm going to then add in my spinach, let that kind of soften with a little bit of salt and pepper. And then the other ingredient that we're going to be using is just a touch of nutmeg. Nutmeg pairs beautifully with spinach and brings out sort of the natural minerality of the spinach. Then for this dish as well, instead of using heavy cream and cheese, which is very traditional for a creamed spinach, we're actually going to be using a full-fat coconut milk. So the coconut milk is really high in antioxidants, and it is also antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory. So this whole dish is really going to be helping out your gut health. All right. And then finally, we'll kind of keep them off to the side, but the lemon zest and the lemon juice is going to be added towards the end just so it can brighten up that flavor and then also give us that beautiful pop of vitamin C to help us absorb all of that iron. All right, so I want to do a close up on my pot here. So we want to heat up our pan before we introduce oil. Allowing our pan to heat up first is going to get us really nice color on our food and also allow us to get that really sort of non-stick capability of our pans working. Okay. So we want to let it heat up a little, and then we're going to introduce our fat. I'm using an extra virgin olive oil for this. Okay. So we want to let that kind of coat the bottom and also heat up again before I add in any of my ingredients. We want to sort of wake up the oil, wake up that non-stick capability, and then introduce our aromatics. And so in this case, that's going to be our onion. Okay. We'll let that cook just for a minute. Just let it cook for a minute. We're going to just stir it around. And just get that onion to soften just a touch before we add in our other aromatics. Right. Just a minute or two, just getting it nicely coated in all of that beautiful olive oil and just introducing it to the heat, kind of waking up that aroma. All right, and then we're going to add in our garlic. We're going to add in our turmeric. We're going to add in our ginger. And again, remember, I had a little bit more than I need, so I'm going to only use part of this. And I can always add in more if I feel like it's missing a little. And then also our minced lemongrass. Beautiful. Oh, it smells so good. Got all of those beautiful herby flavors, the sort of sharpness from the garlic, the sweetness almost from the turmeric. And you can already see the color. That turmeric is sort of making it this gorgeous light yellow color. At this point, we want to add just a little pinch of salt and a little pinch of pepper. It's really important to season as you go. And not only season, but salt is going to help draw out some of the moisture in our onions, which will actually help them cook down a little faster and more efficiently. Great. Getting some nice softening of our onions. And I really like a little bit of crisp still in my onions. I don't want them to be soggy. So I'm just looking for them to be slightly translucent and just a little bit soft. Right. So then now I'm going to go ahead and add in my spinach. And I like to add in about half of it first, kind of let that cook down and also make a little space in my pan. So we'll introduce that little bit of spinach. Again, just a little pinch of salt, because just like with the onions, that little salt will help us draw some of the natural moisture out of our spinach. Great. Starting to break down, starting to get nice and glossy. Wonderful. And then we can go ahead and put in the other half once we've made enough room, because y'all, I'm sure you know, the spinach is just cooked down almost to practically nothing. So we have to use quite a bit of fresh spinach to turn it into a sizable side dish. Great. Got a couple stowaways here. I wanted to pop out of the pot. And then we're going to go ahead and add in that little bit of nutmeg. Again, just let our spinach steam down. And sometimes what I find helps with this is if you have a lid for your pot, to just go ahead and put the lid on for a minute or two, just to allow all of that moisture to kind of cook it down a little. So we'll leave that on for a minute. There any questions so far? Any curiosities or any questions that you all have over the recipe? Yeah, absolutely. If you wanna, yeah, Maritza, if you wanna unmute, please feel free to ask.
Hi, this is just for when I have tried to make recipes with lemongrass in the past. It's always been difficult to find.
Sure.
And if I find it, I find a little piece, and it's super, super expensive. So is there a place? Yeah. So where do you get it?
Yeah, so I often get my lemongrass at the local Asian grocery store. You can often find really nice bundles of them for much less expensive than, say, like at the regular grocery store, where you're just finding, you know, those tiny little pieces in the plastic containers.
Oh, I have to look for a good Asian market close by.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Sure. And then Dinora, if you had a question, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong.
Awesome. Could you use lemongrass paste? Because I know you can get that in a tube.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lemongrass paste will work well for this. One thing you do want to look out for is that it is often cut with citric acid. So it may sometimes change the flavor profile. So you may just want to add a little bit less lemon juice at the end.
Okay. And how much nutmeg?
It's about 1/8 of a teaspoon. So a pretty hefty pinch.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So just letting it steam just for that, you know, minute or so. We can see how much that spinach has wilted down. And then now we're going to go ahead and add in that full fat coconut milk. And it is a whole can of coconut milk. This makes about enough for 4 portions. For like a main dish, about a good solid 4 portions. Or if you're doing more of an appetizer, this can honestly make about 6 good side portions. And so you can see all of that beautiful color coming through from the turmeric. And just that little bit of coconut milk is really making a beautiful sort of creamy addition. We're going to let that cook down on low. I'm going to go ahead and turn down my burner just so that we're at a really low simmer here. Because again, I really love my vegetables to still have a little bit of crisp, a little bit of bite. So we don't want it to cook down super far. So we're going to go ahead and turn this down, and then we're going to prepare our fish. So when using fish on a grill, the most important thing is that your grill is preheated. So what I want to do is get you over just to my cutting board here. So we'll talk about preparing our fish. But in order to get those really beautiful grill lines, we want to make sure that our grill, whatever we're using, whether it's a cast iron pan, a grill pan, or even an outdoor indoor grill, is making sure that we have a really hot grill that we're putting our protein down on. If it's not preheated, that's when you get the excess sticking. Another thing that we can do to prepare our fish to make sure that it's going to be less likely to stick is you can see here, I have it just on a little paper towel, or if you have, a kitchen cloth, we want to make sure that it's nice and dry. Okay? So we want to pat it really dry, because any excess moisture is also going to cause our protein to steam instead of get that beautiful caramelization, which is going to help it release from the pan or the grill or whatever you're using. Okay. So to prepare our halibut, I have a little bit of avocado oil. And now I use avocado oil when I'm doing high temperature cooking, whether that's, sauteing at high heat, searing things, or using my grill, because it has a really high smoke point. This means that it doesn't break down quite as easily. So it's going to be a little bit more beneficial of a fat for high temperature cooking. So I want to put a nice little coating of my avocado oil. And the fish I'm using today is a lovely wild-caught Alaskan halibut. So this fish is really high in, excuse me, I felt like I was about to sneeze. This fish is really high in selenium, which is really beneficial for brain health. So we want to go ahead and make sure it's really well coated on one side. Then we're going to go ahead and flip it over. Get a really nice coating again of that avocado oil. You can also use an extra virgin olive oil for high temperature cooking as well. But I've found that the avocado oil works especially well because it's got such a high smoke point. Okay. And then we want to prepare the seasoning. So I always do 1 part of pepper to 4 parts of salt. So what that means is if I did a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, then I would do a teaspoon and 1/4 of salt. So I'm going to do a hefty pinch on one side of that mixture. And then again, flip my fish over, do a nice coating on the other side. Great. And then I'm going to take you over to my grill. I apologize if there's a little bit of a lag. Takes a second to wake up. I think we're still dark screen, so I'm just going to talk for a second. So again, talking about making sure that our grill is preheated. So the entire time that I have been prepping, doing all of my ingredients, I've actually had my grill heating up. What this is allowing, because I've got a cast iron grill pan here in my stove, this is allowing that cast iron to fully come up to temperature and get as hot as it can. So this is going to get me a really beautiful color and sear on my fish, okay? So in addition to that, whether you're cooking outdoors on a grill or indoors on a grill, you want to put a little additional high temperature oil on the grill itself, okay? This is going to allow that fish to get that color and those beautiful grill lines without it sticking, okay? The other thing that we want to consider when we get our fish down is that you want to decide which is going to be your presentation side, meaning which side of the fish is going to be pointing up on your plate. That's the side that you want to grill first, because the grill lines are always going to look best on that first initial placement. So I know that I want these 2 sides right here to go ahead and be my presentation, get a little bit more oil. And then we're going to just place it at a bit of an angle. So we don't want it to go straight on my grill lines. I want my grill lines to kind of go at a beautiful diagonal. So I want to put my fish on the grill on a diagonal. Okay. All right. So then now we're going to leave this undisturbed for about a minute or 2. A lot of that is going to depend on the thickness and also the type of fish you have. So I said earlier, I've got this beautiful halibut. It's about 1 inch thick. So I'm going to cook it for about 1.5 minutes at each turn. And I'll show you what I mean by each turn. But that's going to get me a really nice medium rare consistency, which is how I like to eat my fish. But we'll also check the temperature of it because that's a really foolproof way to figure out what temperature your fish is at. All right. So we've been sitting undisturbed for about 1 minute. So I'm going to either use my tongs, and then you can see I've got these really beautiful grill lines. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn it about a 1/4 turn so that I get them in the opposite direction on a nice diamond pattern. Okay. And you can see how beautifully that came off of my grill. The nice heat on the grill, also the little layer of the high temperature oil is going to really allow for a non-stick fish. If, however, you find that your fish you're having difficulty, it's sticking, it's not going to just release with your tongs, you can also use a regular metal spatula or this, which is a fish spatula, which is a little flexible to get underneath that fish and kind of help release it from the grill. All right. So again, we're going to leave that undisturbed for about 1 minute, 1.5 minutes. And then we'll go ahead and flip it over and do the same process on the other side. All right, so I'm going to get my tongs. And then again, placing it sort of at an angle, but you can see those beautiful grill lines. And again, flipping over. So beautiful, crisscross, that nice little diamond pattern. And so then again, we're going to let this sit undisturbed for about 1.5 minutes and then do our turn one more time. And then for checking the temperature of our fish, you can use something like an instant read thermometer. This here, it's just an instant read. It goes up to about 400 degrees Fahrenheit. But what this is going to allow me to do is to check the internal temperature of our fish. And if you want it to be more rare, you can pull your fish off at about 120 degrees Fahrenheit. If you want it more well done, you can pull it off around 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Because with all fish, with all proteins, even after you pull it off of the heat source, you're going to continue cooking because it's going to have that residual heat in it. So it's always really good to know what temperature to pull your food off so that it has that time and temperature to carry over to what you want. All right, so I've got about 1 minute maybe left, so I'm going to just check the internal temperature of my fish right now. And I'm at about 115 degrees. And then on this one, I want to check each individual piece because, you know, they might be slightly different thicknesses. All right, and then this one is at about 113. So I want to give them an extra little minute on this side. Because like I said, I like taking mine off around rare, medium rare. So we'll go ahead and pull it off of the heat at about 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. So just a couple more minutes. You can also check the firmness of the fish as well. The firmer it feels when you poke it, the more well done it is. So if it has a little bit of give, that means that it's going to be closer to rare. If it's a firm sort of, it kind of springs right back at you, that means that it's going to be more well done. But most foolproof way to check is with our thermometer. So I'm going to go ahead and check one more time. Beautiful. We're at about 121 and about 120. So I'm going to go ahead and pull them off. Great. And we're going to let them rest while we plate up our spinach mixture. So I'll bring you back over here. Again, apologies for the black screen for a second. For this dish, because the coconut cream spinach is so creamy, I really like to serve it in a large, wide bowl. This will sort of allow that coconut broth to kind of stick into the middle of my dish. And also I'll then have a sauce in accompaniment to my side and my fish. So first, I want to go ahead over to my spinach. We're going to check it out, see how it's doing. So remember, it's just been cooking down on low as we've been cooking our fish. So now I want to give it a taste. So grab a little tasting spoon. Get a little bit of the onions, the spinach, and that coconut broth. And that tastes pretty good on salt level. But the other thing that I want to check too is after I add in, remember that lemon zest, because that's going to add some beautiful brightness, in addition to that little bit of lemon juice, which is going to add that brightness, that little bit of acidity. So we'll mix that in, and then we're going to give it another little taste to see if we need to adjust the heat level, add a little bit more black pepper, if it needs a little bit more salt to help balance out the acidity. So we'll take another little taste. And this is what we call flavor balancing. So this is tasting our food as we're cooking it to make sure it has that really nice balance of acidity, saltiness, sweetness, that umami. So now after adding that little bit of lemon, I do need a little pinch of salt to kind of bring it all together. Beautiful, a couple little stirs, and again, take a little taste. Beautiful. So now that brightness of the lemon is all tying together because of just that a little addition of salt. So we're going to go ahead and get a nice little bit in the bottom of our bowl. And this dish also pairs really well if you want it to be a little more robust. You can add in some steamed rice of choice if you want it to be a little heartier. All right, we're going to come back over. So you have this nice little portion, about 3/4 of a cup of the spinach and the coconut broth. And then we're going to top it with our nice little piece of grilled halibut. And then finish just with a little drizzle of olive oil for a little shine and a little bit of flavor. And there you go. So it's a really nice, fun meal, great for springy, summery. You have the beautiful flavor profiles of the acidity and brightness of your lemon. You have that gorgeous grilled fish, get those really nice grill lines. And I know it's still black. Okay, there it is. There's my face. But you have that really beautiful sort of bright, summery, springy vibe. Also those gorgeous yellow and green colors. So I hope you're able to make this fish. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer some, if about the dish or about the program, whatever you'd like.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Chef Martina.
Yeah.
Oh, it looks like we already have a hand up.
Wonderful. Yeah, go ahead, Maritza.
No, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, that was it. Go for it.
I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about marinating the fish, like for this particular recipe?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you were going to be doing a marinade, I would tie in some of the flavors that we put into the recipe. So like garlic, a little bit of ginger, a little bit of lemon. Also marinating, it's going to depend on what type of fish you're using. If you're using a meatier fish that can hold up to marinade, that would be better. So something that's a little bit firmer. The halibut itself is very delicate. So sometimes the acidity in a marinade will kind of pre-cook it, which can make it a little rubbery. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.